Hello, everyone. Welcome to Fold Academy. My name is Hudson Lin. I am the program coordinator at Fold. I'm really excited today to have Ruby Barrett with us to teach us all about how to write intimacy in genre fiction. But before we start, just a few housekeeping items. This workshop is approximately 1 hour long, which includes about 15 minutes of questions and answers at the end. If you have questions during the workshop, please submit it using the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom screen. We are using Zoom's auto captioning functions, and you can get that by clicking the CC button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Please note that some captions might not be transcribed correctly. However, all captions will be corrected when the recording is made available on YouTube. And yes, there will be a recording of today's webinar, and it will be uploaded to YouTube next week. You will receive an email with the link when it's ready. Now I am delighted to introduce Ruby Barrett. Ruby writes steamy romances with big feelings, mutual pleasure, pining, and healing are common themes in her romances. Before she was a romance author, Ruby worked as a horse groom, a cigarette package warning label researcher, a millennial mommy blog essayist, and a matchmaker with 0 matches. She is a bi woman who lives her own HEA in Ottawa, Canada, with her husband and their child. Welcome, Ruby.
Hi.
Hi, there you are.
Thank you so much for having me.
No problem. Take it away.
Super. So I'm just going to very quickly share my screen for everybody so that we have some visuals. Can everybody see, Lynn?
Yeah, that looks
Okay,
perfect.
perfect. So I'm just going to start really quickly. If you are coming to this outside of romance, that is okay. Everything that I'm talking about, you can apply to genre fiction, or I feel like you can apply to genre fiction. So you don't have to be applying this only to romance. But because I come from romance, that's probably a lot of the references that you're going to hear from me. And just wanted to give you my bona fides before we get started. Hi, I'm Ruby. I write adult contemporary romances. I am a Lambda Literary Award finalist. I have starred reviews from a number of publications. My books have been featured in the New York Times. That probably doesn't really mean anything when it comes to actually writing intimacy, but hopefully it means something to you. And also, before we get started, I just wanted to let everybody know that we are talking about writing intimacy, physical intimacy. And so that means that you might hear words that go beyond the PG-13 label. So if there are people around that you don't want to hear that, put some headphones on, or you can use the captions, or yeah, that's just the warning for you. So let's just jump right in. I when I sort of think about how I write intimacy, when people have asked me before to sort of like give talks like this, one of the first things I always think of is shame. And it kind of sucks that that comes up. But one of the things that I have talked to other romance and intimate writers about is our relationship with shame. And if you are entering into, if you want to write an intimate scene, if you want to write intimacy in your genre fiction, you may experience some shame, or you may, maybe you don't. That's also great. But I have talked to even the most, New York Times best-selling romance authors have talked about experiencing shame when writing their romance. And um, the thing that I always tell other people to do is to find a way to set aside shame. Um, I'm not going to tell you how to do that because I don't know that I don't know that it's really so easy as to just, it's sort of like telling someone to like not be anxious, like just don't feel anxiety, like just don't feel shame, like doesn't really work like that. I also, this sounds like a humble brag, I don't feel a lot of shame when it comes to writing intimacy. Um, a lot of those times when people talk about writing their own intimate scenes and thinking like, oh my God, like so and so is going to read this, I often am sort of like, well, I don't feel shame if my mom reads this because I told my mom that this was going to be in here. And so she decides to read that, that was on her. That's not a me problem. So not everybody obviously is going to come to it with that level of, I guess, audacity. But you guys, if you want to write intimacy, I think the first thing that we have to do is to set aside our shame in intimacy because I don't think that we can write our best when we feel shame. And that doesn't just apply to intimacy, right? I think that applies to everything. When we can be our most authentic and vulnerable selves on the page, we can create our best work. Some people might be coming to shame with, from like religious backgrounds. They might be coming to shame from just different lived experiences. And so again, I'm not going to sit here and tell you how to do that. But one of the things that I will say that always feel really powerful to me is um, the kids these days love to call things cringe, and I think vulnerability um, and intimacy, whether that is emotional intimacy or physical intimacy, are often seen as cringe. And I think that cringe is just a derogatory term for being earnest. So if I'm cringe, please lock me up. I don't mind. I would much rather be earnest and vulnerable about the things that I'm feeling and sharing them with people than to not do that. Um, and the other thing that I always like to talk about when we're talking about shame um, and writing intimacy is that for me, writing intimacy is an act of liberation and it is an act of resistance. Um, a lot of people don't want us to talk about intimacy, whether that be emotional intimacy or physical intimacy, especially when we are coming from uh, traditionally underrepresented communities, because intimacy is where humanity exists and where it lives and where it thrives. Intimacy is where community exists and thrives. And um, community and humanity are two things that a lot of very evil power holders don't want us to connect with. So every time, if ever I feel a little bit of shame creeping in while I'm typing away at my keyboard, I think, this is my little act of liberation for the day. This is my little act of resistance for the day. I'm not gonna let the man get me down. I'm gonna write this and I'm gonna feel good about it, and I'm not gonna let anybody make me feel bad about it. But again, that's what works for me. I can't tell you what works for you, but I do just always want to really empower you to find your way through that mire of shame, because on the other side is where really beautiful work happens. Um, so next, when we are thinking about writing an intimate scene, whether we are writing in romance or in genre fiction, we have to sort of understand our spice level before we go in. And the most important um, thing to remember with our spice level is that our spice level should reflect our tone in the book, and it should sort of fit the rules of the book that we're writing. So I'm going to use a romance example. If I'm writing an Amish romance, which, are kind of like a thinly veiled sort of way to refer to an inspirational romance or a Christian romance, there's not going to be a lot of spice. I don't think any spice on the page. Maybe a kiss. I'm going to think maybe a kiss like once they're married type of thing. Our intimacy on those in those books are probably going to come a lot from emotional intimacy and not from physical intimacy. So I'm not going to write a scene with a spice level that has, on page open door um, uh, physical intimacy happening. And also, just uh, realize I should clear this up. When I talk about writing intimacy, writing physical intimacy, I mean um, anything that might sexually titillate you. Um, I think we kind of uh, get into the rut or the pattern of calling anything that's like sexual a sex scene, but like sex looks different for all types of people, right? So, sex, sex in some of my books might involve a man and a woman and a penis and a vagina and insertion. That's the not safe for work content warning I was talking about earlier. But intimacy or sex for another story might look like a strap on. It might look like using your hands. It might look like just words, just speaking words. All of those things are intimacy. And if you are writing them with the intention of creating um, uh, physical or sexual titillation, then that would be intimacy to me. So I just want to remove the word sex because I think sex has a specific connotation, and I use intimacy to talk about all types of like sexual activities. Um, so sorry, back to spice level. Another thing about spice is, again, if you're coming at this not from the romance space, spice level is just kind of a way that we talk about how hot it might get on page. So if you have like one chili pepper, low spice level, you're probably not having, you're having like a closed door romance where think of like a Hallmark movie where you don't see something happening on the page or sorry, on the screen. Or you might have, maybe you're writing like a, a super dark romance with like BDSM, you are probably going to have like five chilies. Everything is seen on page. Everything is felt and discussed on page. Um, I'm not going to make a comparison to actual pornography because that is opening a new can of worms. But you know, as spicy as you can imagine in terms of on screen. Um, so back to spice level. Uh, when we write a spice level outside the tone of the overall work, we are making we are sort of breaking a promise to our reader. And so that's why I think it's important that we have to understand what our spice levels are going to be beforehand. So like I said, with say an Amish or an inspirational or Christian romance, we're not going to have high spice. If we put something on page like that, our reader is going to feel betrayed because they opened this book, they came to this book with certain expectations. Much in the same way that if you are a romance reader and you get to the end of the book and it's not a happily ever after, you will feel betrayed. The genre convention has been broken. Or if you finish a mystery novel and you get to the end and they haven't solved the mystery, you are going to feel betrayed because that was the purpose of this of opening the book. And sort of on the other side of that, if you put two very muscly men on your cover and they are surrounding a petite woman and you don't have an on-page threesome scene, your readers are probably going to feel betrayed, right? If that's an all closed door romance, your readers are probably going to feel betrayed. So that's again why it's really important to understand our spice level, understand the tone and the that we're writing in, and understand um, the sort of like reader contract that we're making with, or the contract that we have with our reader, and making sure that our intimacy reflects what our reader is looking for. And again, I know I'm going a little fast. It's because I have a lot to talk about. If you have questions, I see lots of comments, so just make sure you keep those questions in there because I feel like I might be talking too fast. So, um, now we're getting to sort of the sort of main theme of this whole presentation, doing it for the plot. Um, why we are writing intimacy like in um, genre fiction to begin with. There's a sort of general rule in romance. Um, I have slightly contentious relationship with this rule, but that's neither here nor there. But the general rule is that an intimate scene shouldn't be there if it isn't moving the plot forward. And I think that that is generally the case. We should be thinking of an intimate scene um, in a lot of ways like an action scene, because they are in a lot of ways the same, right? We're doing a lot of physical blocking. Um, and what happens at the beginning of the action scene, our characters should be different than at the end of the action scene, right? Or what happens at the end, they should be different from the beginning, because maybe they've had to fight their enemy or, unalive someone. Same sort of thing in a romance, again, generally. Um, but for specifically for writing intimacy, what I mean when I say that an intimate scene shouldn't be there or an intimate scene should serve to move the plot forward, it means that if I, took my surgical tools and I cut that scene out of the book, and then you read the book without it, if you are like, I don't understand why, like how they got here emotionally, then it means that that intimate scene was integral to the book. It's part of the spine. It's part of the structure of the book. And so I'm going to use one of my own books as an example. This is not a plug. I'm going to explain a lot to you, so you don't have to go read it to understand. So don't worry about that. I am using the most likely to match example. So in most likely to match, this is my most recent release. Our hero, who is the gentleman on the cover, Dean, and our heroine, Chloe, knew each other in high school. And she was very popular, and he was very not popular. And her friends did something very, very terrible to him involving a camera phone and his penis. And he was very, very hurt by that, as he should be. And many years later, he and Chloe have an opportunity to reconnect. And of course, the sparks that they felt for each other when they first knew each other are flying again. But there's always this feeling of distrust between the two, because even though she wasn't directly involved in what happened, she was friends with those people, and that makes sense that he might feel a little bit of distrust towards her. Um, and so I knew that I had to write a scene and include a scene that sort of flipped things on its head for Dean, where he was able to use a camera. Dean is also a photographer, so that was important. But he was able to use a camera um, um, with Chloe in an intimate setting. And there were, there was discussions about consent, and there was also apologies for overstep boundaries, and it was meant to be a healing scene. And I think I did it pretty well. That's just me. You can make your own decisions if you decide to read it, because again, it's not a plug. But I think that if I were to go in and scoop that scene out, the reader might not feel like they're getting at the end of the book, they are getting a solid happily ever after. They are probably not going to really understand how Chloe has sort of made her case that she is emotionally trustworthy for Dean. And it's because that scene is so integral uh, to their arc and their overall happily ever after. So when I say doing it for the plot, I mean that Chloe and Dean are doing it for the plot. They are literally doing it so that they can reach their happily ever after at the end. And generally, again, that is something that you want to do when you are writing your own intimate scene. Okay, so we've talked about, writing intimacy, step one, unpacking our shame. Just that very easy, easy thing to do, just unpack shame, no big deal. We're talking about identifying our spice levels as sort of step two. And then we're talking about the importance of what the intimacy means to the story, and understanding what that, like when we are writing it, understanding the importance of the intimacy to the story. Um, Next step is understanding intimacy and action. So this is again where we kind of make these comparisons of intimate scenes to like action scenes, like fight scenes, and where we're talking about physical blocking and also feelings. I think that the most important thing, sorry, if I'm looking off, it's just because I have notes off to the side here. I want to make sure I'm getting everything for you guys. But I think that the most physical blocking is not uh, is not as important in an intimate scene as how the physical blocking feels. So when I say that, I mean, yes, of course, we need to know, we need to make sure that everybody only has like the right number of like body parts and appendages and that we do know where they're going. But we don't need to sort of follow, you know, hand A goes to hip B and then uh, thigh A, and then, do you know what I mean? Like, we don't need to follow that so much as we need to understand that what does hand A touching hip B feel like? Um, and feeling on two levels, okay? So not only like maybe, let's use a Victorian or a Regency romance, historical romance as an example, where, touching is not happening very often. Let's say the first time our heroine touches, um, her love interest, that is a huge deal for her. What does that feel like for her to put her hand on the hip of this person that she has like longed for? And what does it feel like for them to feel that? Um, and are there people around? Does that sort of ratchet up the intimacy and ratchet up the potential for pleasure? So like the actual physical feelings of that, rather than just actually putting it there. But then tying it back in to feelings. Um, does 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 that touch feel like you know, I never want to wash my hand again? Because it's sacred now because I have touched the person that I love more than anything. Like tying it back to our emotions is just as important. As uh, the actual touching. One of the things I like to say is, don't tell me how they kissed. Tell me how they felt about it. And I sort of got this from a friend of mine. I was, reading her. She writes YA, so they were just kissing in that scene, and she said it felt like it was falling sort of flat. And when I read it, I was essentially sort of like, I know everything about how they kissed and like where their hands were and, mouth feel, but I don't know how either of them feels about it. And I want to know how they feel about it. Is kissing the greatest thing that's ever happened to them? Or are they just like, "Meh, it's fine." Because both are fine answers, but that's going to tell me as a reader how to feel next. And I'm also going to give you an example for this as well. Um, Another YA example, and this will have spoilers for the Mortal Instruments series. So um, if you don't want spoilers, we can maybe just like mute until I move to the next slide. Um, but yeah, so this example is the City of Glass, the Mortal Instruments 3, and Kissing Your Brother. So if you know anything about the Mortal Instruments, um, at the beginning of the series, our heroine, Clary, has a crush on this guy, Jace, and he seems to have a crush on her, and they kiss, and then they find out that they are siblings, and they're like, oh my God. But the big problem with, other than just like kissing your sibling, is that they still want to kiss each other really bad. And they're like, why do we still want to kiss each other when we're siblings? Um, Sorry, they're not like raised together. They like meet as teenagers, just to like clarify. But I they're struggling this whole time with like, why do I really want to kiss this person? And there's a scene in the Mortal Instruments 3, City of Glass, where the two of them sort of, finally kiss again after denying themselves the opportunity to kiss their sibling for so long. And it feels like the best thing in the world. It feels right, you know? Um, it Clary knows that she's supposed to kiss this person, and it makes no sense that he's her brother. She knows she's supposed to kiss him. And then Later in the book, because this is YA and we have to have a love triangle, another young man enters Clary's life, and he's interested in her. And when he kisses her, it feels like Clary is falling into a void. It feels like Clary is being surrounded by blackness and darkness and wrongness. It feels like, I would imagine, what kissing your brother should feel like. And now I won't say anything else. I will let you, if you want to read it, you can find out what happens next. But I think you can probably guess what happens next. But what Cassandra Clare did really well here is she showed us, she took two things, two actions, right, that are the same thing. And she showed us that, I can't tell you like whose hip was where and what the mouthfeel was like, but I can tell you that Clary loved one action and she hated the other. And what that meant to me as the reader and helped me understand what was coming in the story was super important. Okay, so now the happy ending, the thing we're all here for. When I'm talking about the happy ending, I don't just mean, I know this is going up on YouTube later, so I maybe shouldn't say like all the big words. But I think we all know what I mean. I mean, I do mean that, but I mean, like who gets the happy ending when we are writing an intimate scene, whether that's in romance or in any type of genre fiction. We want to make sure that the person whose POV the story is in is the person who should be getting the happy ending in that moment. Again, this goes back to sort of like our action. We need to see who the character was at the beginning of the scene, and we need to see how they've changed by the end of the scene. And if that person does not have sort of like the most to lose, the most to change about themselves, if that hinge isn't the most important for that person in that POV, then it's probably not the right choice for whose POV that is. Now, if you are writing a single POV book, that's fine. You already know who is getting the happy ending. But if you are writing dual or multiple POVs, then it will be really important to make sure that we have chosen the right person. Again, this also goes back to doing it for the plot, right? If the wrong person is getting the happy ending in that scene, then it's not going to really feel satisfying to us by the end of the story. And so I like to sort of use an MFM example to sort of describe this. Now, I'm using MFM. We can use any gender, just to be clear, because everybody gets to experience intimacy. This is the one I'm using just because I think it's just easiest for my brain right now. But so let's imagine that we have an MFM scene, which would be we have two men and one woman, two males, one female, being physically intimate together on page. So I'm going to use this example of, let's say we have M1, male one, and M2, male two, and male one has never had sex with a man before. And so I've done this presentation multiple times, and every time I get to this part, it's always a little awkward to try to explain it to you. But this is the shame, I have a little bit of shame that I have to unpack here. But so M1 has never been physically intimate with a man before where he has been penetrated. And M2 is going to be the one to do that. And it's a really big moment for them in their relationship. As any sort of like physical intimacy has the potential to be. In that scene, I would expect that M1 would be the one who receives the happy ending. In other words, he is the one that gets the POV because he's going through a lot of feelings right now. He is being incredibly vulnerable for his partners and for the reader. And that's a really big deal. But we should, I feel like as an author, I would want to share that. That's most important to my readers. You could argue that M2 could also potentially should get that POV because he's being entrusted with something that's really special and personal and um, really, sweet, or maybe not sweet, who knows? But like it's still, he's an active participant in this scene. And uh, again, I know I'm getting very specific here. Obviously, in an MFM scene where we have two men being physically intimate, the F doesn't have to be hands off. But let's just imagine in this one she is. Let's just imagine in this one she's not participating and she is letting her partners sort of, just enjoy each other. The POV I don't want to be in for that scene is hers. Um, Unless you can somehow argue to me again, like maybe it's a single POV, that's fine, and it's her POV, but like this moment between this throuple, these people is there's something really big happening between for one person at least, but these two especially. That doesn't mean that she is not a part of the relationship at all, of course, but there's, I guess, just a bigger priority to me on the page for who needs to be the most emotionally vulnerable. I have read scenes like this before where I ended up um, sort of being told by the non-participant. And it wasn't meant to be a sort of voyeurism or like a cuck chair or something. It was not meant to sort of be like that, but I was just being told by the participant um, what is happening. And it really took me out emotionally from the scene. It goes from being really deep and really, you know, in the moment, and really takes you to that 30,000-foot view that feels very distant. So I always, like to say, choose your POV and choose the, who receives their happy ending on page really well, because we don't want to make our reader be the voyeur in the scene and have to guess at the feelings of our characters. I had to guess. If I have to guess at the feeling of what this important moment is for this other character, I've probably done something wrong. Um, uh, and I need to maybe consider rewriting that scene with a different POV. So potential pitfalls. We have kind of gone over some already. I'm just checking my time here and make sure I don't think I'm too over, but we have kind of gone through some already. So potential pitfalls include not writing a spice scene that reflects the tone of our book, and therefore sort of like breaking our contract with our reader. Removing or sorry, not um, uh, creating a scene that is moving the plot forward in a way that uh, contributes to the happily ever after at the end. Again, that's specific to romance, but for the scene itself, at the end of the scene, if emotionally the character is not, if we don't get to see how the character emotionally changes because we've decided to fade to black for our intimate scene, then we might have made the wrong choice there. Another issue is focusing too much on physical blocking. I'm just going to jump over here, but focusing too much on physical blocking. One of the things that I have noticed in terms of pitfalls is that we can often get into like overly mechanical, intimate scenes um, by sort of trying to cover them up with like flowery language. And that's where we're just really focusing a lot on like where hands go, where body parts go, and then trying to just like slap that fancy language on things instead of just digging deeper. Repeat some of the same words if you have to, or some of the same labels for body parts if you have to, or just skip over where maybe that hand has to go every time, but tell me how I feel about it instead of using these sort of uh, flowery words for different body parts. Um, I know a lot of people will often talk about biological names or biological labels for body parts as being a pitfall, and that is totally up to you. I personally am a biological name apologist. I think that every romance can have space for at least one biological name in the right place. I don't think that there's ever a time I'm going to need to say like vast deference. Um, it doesn't come into the physicality of the scene very often, being sort of an internal organ. But like, I will drop a penis in there once in a while. I will drop a labia or a vulva in there once in a while. That works for me. If it doesn't work for you, that is okay. um, I do always say, if the biological name is not working for you, it might be good to interrogate why. Is that coming from a place of shame, or is it coming from it's just not for me? That is up to you. But again, that is another sort of potential pitfall. So I think we've said them all. Uh, the spice level, the intimacy rule of moving the plot forward, the blocking, and the type of language that we're using. Um, and then finally, for our sort of last step in writing intimacy, as with the real thing, I think that practice makes perfect. That's just me again. If you want to get good at writing it, I would suggest reading a ton of it and writing a ton of it. And your first times are probably not going to be great, which is a very awesome sort of parallel. Yeah, your first time won't always be great. You might not enjoy yourself. That's okay. My very first intimate scene that I ever wrote, I got feedback on it, and they were like, it was really cheesy. It was corny, and I died a little on the inside. But then I just kept going. I just kept going because, again, I don't have any shame. Um, so I just kept going. And so I really encourage you to do that too. Just keep going. Just keep writing. Find the thing that works for you. Um, find the things that feel good to you. And I also promise you that whatever feels good to you, there is somebody else in the world who wants to read that. There's 7 billion people on this planet. And so, whatever you like to read and write, there is at least one other person out there who likes to read and write that. That does not, but obviously, that does not include non consensual, like minors, children. I think we all know that that goes without saying, but I just need to say it, obviously. Okay. And then finally, we're getting to the end. Aftercare, everybody's favorite. This is where I just give my little pitch on why I think writing intimacy is important. If you're a romance reader, you likely already agree. If you're a genre fiction reader and writer, maybe you don't fully understand yet, and that's okay. I think intimacy can and should be integral to storytelling. Like I said at the top, vulnerability is where we do our best work, and vulnerability is found in intimacy. It doesn't have to be physical. Okay, it never has to be physical. That's how I like to do it, but it never has to be. But intimacy, again, is where we find humanity, and it's where we find community. And if we are telling a story, storytelling is a tool of community. It is a tool of our humanity. It's how we continue to be. So, intimacy, however it works for you, needs to be a part of your storytelling, I think, in order to be the best that it can be. And I think that it makes fiction better. That's why I think intimacy is so important to our writing. Um, and then I always like to close off with just this little quote. One of the things that I love to ask other romance authors is, why do you love writing romance? And I asked Ava Wilder this, and Ava gave me perhaps my favorite answer so far of life. She said, "Love is the closest thing to magic that humans get to experience." And that, I just like perished. I thought that that was the most beautiful thing I'd ever heard. And I agree wholeheartedly. And physical intimacy is one of the tools of that magic. That's me. I said that. But that's why I think it is so important to include in our work and in our writing and to explore. It's not the only tool, right? There are plenty of tools, but it is one of the tools. And I think that it is in some ways kind of untapped still. There's still so much left to explore about intimacy and physical intimacy and the things that we can do to it or do with it, especially when we consider who gets to tell stories, who we are allowing to tell stories, and what stories haven't been told yet. How, what are the places in the universe that we can go when we get to hear more stories about intimacy from more people. Uh, and that's it. I don't know what my time is like. Did I do good?
Yeah,
Did
you
I
did
okay?
great. You did great. Amazing. Thanks so much, Ruby. All right. So if you have questions for Ruby, please put them into the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom screen. If you're not able to type in a question, you can raise your hand and I can unmute you to, and then you can ask your question verbally. So let me see what questions we've got so far. Okay, so with the MFM scene example, would you say a chapter split could be something to use if you want to explore both M1 and M2's POV?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I don't so I've certainly like when I'm, writing this has only happened when I've been writing for tradition like a traditional publisher. I've sometimes had an editor be like, "Oh, like let's not split it. Let's keep it in the same POV." Which is fine. Like it made me have to do like a little bit like harder work in terms of the type of like emotion I wanted to show. But I think that I personally think that doing like a chapter split or a scene split, depending on how you're formatting, is absolutely fine to do. Especially when you have something that's like super integral happening on the page. I would rather do this scene split and to be able to see like both sides or both POVs than to like sort of be left wanting, right?
Great. The other thing about using like a chapter split or a spleen split is it keeps people wanting to keep flipping the page, right? So it kind of like moves them, makes them want to read another chapter. So that's
Yes.
another good thing
Yes.
to incorporate there.
Very, very, yes.
um, okay, what would be the best way to write scenes where it's not something the authors experience personally or the type of intimacy they
Hmm.
have actually experienced themselves?
Yes. Okay. This is such a great question. Um, okay. Without getting too deep into my own experiences, because that's for me, and we don't need to share that. Not everything I write about in intimate scenes or just in books are things that I have experienced, right? Um, I always love to use this example. Lee Bardugo in the Six of Crows books writes, I mean, she does it in other books, but she writes action scenes really well, and she writes the most visceral unaliving scenes, of people being stabbed with knives. And I don't think Lee Bardugo has ever killed anybody in her life. But she is still able to tell us what it feels like, right? We are all capable of like emotional or sorry, all capable of empathy and understanding what something might feel like. So even if we haven't done that thing ourselves, with a little research, sometimes we might need to find out, the correct terms for things and whatnot. But like with a little research, we can all understand what it might feel like. And I think also like just using our power of empathy. I think that's probably why we're all writers. We have a lot of empathy and it has to spill out somewhere. It goes onto the page, right? Like think about what it feels like, even if it's not something you've experienced before, the chances are you know how to explain that. I think that there are romance authors who have maybe never been in love before, but they know how to write about love just because I'm I'm married, but maybe my marriage isn't happy. You don't know. Just because I'm married, do I get to write about love more than a single person? Absolutely not. It's about my ability to experience empathy and to express it to other people. So never think that because you haven't experienced that, you know, one particular uh, activity before, you don't get to do it. With the caveat that as a white woman, I'm probably not going to write a Black woman's experience because I think that a Black woman has a better ability than me to express that, and should get the platform to do that. I am going to say that part. Um, uh, so within reason, right? But yeah, I don't think that we should ever stop ourselves from writing something just because we maybe haven't had that lived experience before.
So you mentioned a little bit about how intimacy can be like appendage A insert into slot B,
Mhm.
and like or it could be not necessarily certain types of appendages, or maybe it's like sexy talk or something like that. Can you talk a bit about how you create intimacy when it's not just like physically like mashing
Right.
body parts together?
Yes. So I think it still comes for me, it comes from a lot of very sensory places, right? So maybe it's not about where someone is being touched, but it's about what the sound of their voice. Maybe someone has a voice that just like moves through your whole body and you can feel it everywhere. Or maybe it's the smell of that person, or, the place that you're in. Maybe it's the sounds that somebody is making. Sounds are an incredibly intimate and sometimes erotic sensation, right? It's so much, intimacy is so much more than just the physical touch. It is all of our senses. We don't experience physical intimacy just through touch. We experience it through all of our senses. And I think, the thing that to me makes writing so much more powerful is that than say like doing it on a screen, is that we get to tap into every single one of them and tell our reader and have our reader experience it. So,
Um, Next question is um different characters. So if in a book you have the two main characters, or maybe there's like three main characters, or maybe it's like a wide choose and you've got like a dozen different characters, or like you're writing multiple books and so you've obviously written a lot of sex scenes, but how do you keep it like fresh, so to speak, like making sure that each character experiences that intimacy in their own particular way, how to keep it different or exciting or unique, like across multiple books?
right. Yes. Well, I think again that really does go back to character, right? You and I could write just a kissing scene, right? But it would be two totally different experiences, because we are going to come to those scenes with completely different mindsets and our own lived experiences, our own skill, and our own interests. And this goes the same for the characters you're building. Um, I mean, it requires that we know our characters really well. But you could, say have two, in the matchbooks, my two most recent releases, um, you could have like I'm almost positive there's a physically intimate scene that sort of repeats, in the sense that like the characters do the same things, but it's how those characters again feel about it that is what makes them different and what makes it like not boring, right? The most important thing is the individuality that comes from each character. Uh, so if you write the same stories over and over again, that is okay, as long as our characters are different, because our characters are experiencing it all in a different way.
You mentioned at the beginning that there's this general rule that the sex scene should forward the plot. And you mentioned kind of that like for the most part, yes, you agree, but like maybe not 100% of the time. Can you talk a little more about that?
Yeah, so I think that there are times when intimacy for intimacy's sake between two characters is a, and I mean, I guess this is like, where we kind of get into maybe something that gets a little too philosophical, right? But like, um, couples are just intimate to be intimate. Couples are bored. And maybe they're a married couple and they don't have the kids around for an afternoon and there's nothing good on TV. That is intimacy for intimacy's sake, right? It might on the surface not look like it's doing much for what's going to happen next, what's going to happen at the end. I mean, it can, but doesn't always have to. Um, but I think that that's still really important. I think that that is so important, especially to the character and to the actual relationship arc. And so that's where I sort of am like, if I just want to make him kiss this time, I might just make him kiss this time. And it doesn't have to be that deep. But I still, as with all rules, I think that like, we need to make sure that we understand them before we break them. I have certainly broken that rule before I understood why I needed to understand the rule. And then I had an intimate scene that really fell flat. Um, uh, but now I also feel really comfortable just being like, yeah, sometimes they're just going to do a little hanky panky in the, you know, public bathroom, I don't know, or something. And then they're going to move on with their life and it doesn't have to mean anything.
And so then would you say that it's okay to have those scenes for the purpose of being like titillating, sexually tittillating, or
Yes.
like, is
Yes.
there a line then between like a sexually titillating scene in a larger story versus like smut or whatever we want to call
Yeah.
slang?
Yeah. Oh, that's a good question. Um, so to me, I guess like I think it's all smut. It's if I'm titillated, then it's smut to me, and I'm okay with that label. I know some people aren't okay with it. I know like there's a lot of big feelings about it, but like I'm gonna sort of embrace it, and you're not gonna use it against me. It's gonna be a power. Like I'm not gonna let you take that power away. But I think if it's not like it should all be titillating in a way, right? If we're not here to be titillated, if you're picking up a Ruby Barrett book at least and you're not here to be titillated, I don't think you're going to enjoy yourself. Um, so um, I don't know, Lynn. That's a really good question.
It is a really good question, right? And I think, I mean, I'm just going to insert my opinion,
Yes,
even
please.
though folks didn't sign on to hear my opinion. Um, but I think I agree with you. Like, I think that not every book has to be like super deep about like really hardcore life or humanity stuff. And sometimes it's just like a feel good, have fun read. And part of that is having the smutty scenes in it. And it's like, and like that's what I'm reading it for because it is entertaining or it is like takes me away from real life for a little bit.
Yes. Oh my
And
God.
so, yeah, I think that in itself can be the purpose, and that's okay.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Um, okay, this is interesting. How do you establish tension from the beginning of a book when the physical oh, let me rephrase. So how do you use physical intimacy as a way to create tension between the characters? Or can
Hmm.
intimacy be used as a conflict tension tool?
Yes. So sort of, I think like, sometimes we see the intimacy as like the thing that we're working towards, right? And then it's the fact that they haven't touched for so long and then they have and now, oh, we've finally gotten it. But like when we're starting with intimacy from the beginning, do we lose that conflict and that tension? Is that sort of okay? Um, so yeah, yeah, of course, physical again, not to not to like I don't want to draw too many similarities between an action scene and physical intimacy, but like um there's always inherent risk involved. There's always risk of emotional pain, right? Um, I, not just hopefully not physical pain unless that's consensual. And there's always this power. There's always a power play involved in physical intimacy between our characters. That creates conflict and tension. Um, uh, there's always, this one of the most sort of like tried and true romance tropes is like, we're just going to do it to get it out of our system. And then you're like, oh no, it seems like we have, like, it's not out of our system yet. What a deep well our system has that we have to continue. Like, when will it end? Like physical intimacy does not have to be our sort of end game, right? Physical intimacy is such a great way because, again, every time we do it, if we are ratcheting up our feelings along with it, then the stakes continue to be higher and higher because my heart can break just as easily as if we touched first on page 10 and as if we touched first on page, 210 or something. My heart still has the capacity to be broken. So it's just always about like making sure that we can break our characters' hearts at any moment.
I like the idea of like the characters' feelings for each other being mirrored in how physically intimate they are. And then that's like one way to create the story arc. But there's also ways that you can like flip that on its head, right? Where like they can be very physically intimate, but not emotionally. And
Yes,
then the trajectory kind of goes like in
the
opposite
other
directions.
way.
And
Yeah.
you realize that like becoming more emotionally intimate probably means less physical, but it can
Yes.
also be more meaningful that way.
I like honestly, and this has happened in a book recently. I want to say it's Kate Canterbury's The Worst Guy that she does this really well. In when in this sort of second, or I should say maybe the last third of the book, her use of intimacy goes from that sort of like conflict, risk, titillation to deep, deep meaning. And like she did it so masterfully. But yeah, that's where we flip that on its head. It's so powerful and so well done.
Okay, so that's one great recommendation. Do you have any other recommendations of authors who write intimacy really well?
How much time do we have? Okay. Um, Sherry Thomas. Um,
Love
she's
Cher.
another. Oh my God. Um, if Sherry Thomas has no fans, I am dead. She writes intimacy, and again, in a way that she has taken a needle and a thread, and she has put physical intimacy and emotion into her threads, and she has, woven this story together that way. One does not exist without the other. It's fantastic. I recently finished. Oh no, I'm gonna forget it. It was on audio. I think Tia Williams, 7 Days in June. I found like that was an example to me where voice is so powerful in creating intimacy without, like that to me is a really great example of just having such a strong voice and being able to make you feel everything for a character. Um, okay, I'll do one more. Oh my God. Another, okay. Um, no.
It's okay. You're fine.
Okay.
You can
I
stop.
no, I have it. I have it. Katie Casey, um, writes baseball books, and their books have made me like cry with the way that they um, turn vulnerability and masculinity. into something that feels tangible, something that you could like bite. Not just like you're not just biting like a baseball catcher's butt. You're like their vulnerability feels like real. It's Katie Casey's books are I reread their books probably like once a year, honestly, because they are so good at writing intimacy. And they also do a really good job of weaving, like they're not doing a ton of blocking, physical blocking, but you know how everything feels. You are so just like on point with how everything feels. So
I agree. Katie is amazing at it, and everybody should go and read Katie's books.
yes.
Okay, so we are out of time. So I'm just going to wrap up with a couple of um, announcements. Our next Fold Academy. Oh, well, first of all, thank you so much to Ruby and this amazing talk. And the recording would be up next week in YouTube. You'll receive an email with the link when it's ready. Our next Fold Academy will be on Saturday, November 15th. Editor Amber Riaz will be with us. She's going to be talking about decolonizing editing. This is a workshop that we had at Fold quite a few years ago, and a lot of people have asked us to bring it back. And so we're going to look at editing. How do we do that through a decolonizing lens? Registration is open now, and you can visit thefoldcanada.org/academy for more info. Fold Kids Book Fest is coming up soon. We're really, really excited, from November 4th to November 9th. If you have any little ones in your life, I know it's a little weird to talk about Fold Kids after we just had a workshop about writing intimacy, but we contain multitudes. We've got an amazing lineup of authors and illustrators. So there's going to be story times and writing exercises, lots of hands-on activities for kids of all ages. So if you have little ones in your life, you can check that out at foldkidsbookfest.org. We also have a survey that takes just a few minutes to fill out. I'm going to put it into the chat here. And it will be really helpful for us to know what was working, what is not working, what you would like to see in the future. So if you could take a couple minutes to fill that out, that would be fantastic. And lastly, we're committed to keeping Fold Academy free for all writers. And so to do that, we depend on the generosity of our supporters. If you found value in our Fold Academy workshops, please consider supporting us with a monthly or one-time donation. You can visit thefoldcanada.org/donate for various donation options. Thank you so much for being here, and see you next time. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.